Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Victoria Bright. I'm the Director of Programs and Engagement at Tech Alliance at Southwestern Ontario and one of 17 regional innovation centers in Ontario. And we're committed to innovative companies who are launching, scaling, and competing in today's economic climate by providing advisory services, accelerator programs, and experiences like today, and with partners with all of you. So with dramatic changes in our business landscape and new government announcements, we're pleased to be joined once again by our partners at KPMG and our fellow regional innovation centers in Ontario, including Jeff Cheeseborough from Innovate Niagara and Yvonne Pilon from Windsor, Essex, and WeTech. And this partnership definitely demonstrates our interest in supporting all of you and the business community throughout the region to navigate through COVID-19, bringing you information on the latest in programs and relief efforts as they unfold. So we're pleased to host the emerging COVID-19 legislative work sharing updates, and it is an update to last week's webcast with KPMG. So before we get started, I just want to share a few key points with everyone. So everyone's mic is muted, and if you have any questions, please submit them through the Zoom Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And this webinar will be recorded and available after the call. In addition, we are going to be hosting one-on-one consultations with Jenna and Ben afterwards, which I will provide more details at the end. So now on to our presentation. I'm very pleased to introduce Jenna Kirk and Ben Lynn of KPMG. Ben and Jenna?
Thank you,
Ben?
Victoria.
Yes.
Is Jenna still muted?
I think she may have dropped the call. Did you want to start then, Ben?
Yeah, so I apologize. There is some technical difficulties with Jenna's side this morning. So I will do my best to cover her part of the presentation. Some of you probably already joined us in last week's webinar. So we're going to do a recap for those topics that we covered from the last time. But we do have some new information since the government announced a few, the details on a few programs. So we are going to put more time on that. So let me just start it here. So employment challenge, this part is...
Ben, I'm just going to ask you to, if you wouldn't mind, just flip the slides for me.
So
I'm just having some,
okay.
I am back on. I'm just having technical difficulties, so I'm actually just calling in on my phone, so I'm trying to get my computer to work, but I'm happy to start us off. So thank you so much for doing the intro. So first we're going to take a look at employment challenges. And I don't know about you, but I feel like every time I've turned around lately, there's a new announcement introducing a program or a benefit or modifying an existing or recently announced policy or program. Or they've completely scrapped a recently announced benefits program. So it's hard to keep up with all the challenges, let alone understand all the minute details. There are also qualification requirements for the programs, including gross revenue reduction, taxable capital restrictions, and arm's length source requirements, which are not as straightforward as they may initially seem. Luckily at KPMG, we have such a great group of people who are willing to jump on calls, even late into the night, share insights, and create clarity. So hopefully through this presentation, we'll be able to answer your questions and shed some light on these new benefits and programs. So if we go to the first slide, we call this the new temporary norm. And while we all know that this is temporary, there's really no way of knowing how long temporary will last. So businesses are being faced to adapt and readapt and readapt. At this point, many organizations have taken a look at their workforce to see what can be done to balance continuing business and reducing costs. With most provinces mandating shutdowns of non-essential services, employers have likely already explored whether remote working options are available. I won't spend a lot of time on remote work, except to say that you still need to manage your remote workforce, and having proper detailed policy guidelines and performance review plans is essential for ensuring productive remote work and giving your employees structure. This will actually help them to adapt quicker to the changes. Where businesses have been allowed to remain open, social distancing, hygiene, and other requirements have been mandated. Many businesses, therefore, had to make modifications, which ultimately resulted in reduced hours for many employees. While unilateral change to an employee's hours can lead to a constructive dismissal claim, given the current environment, the risk is low and can be further mitigated by taking steps to assist employees who are facing reduced income. So if you look at the next slide, which is support for employees and employers. While some employers have been able to maintain employees at full salaries, most cannot. Consequently, Service Canada's Work Share program has become one of the most popular benefit programs that Service Canada offers for employers to apply for. While we have been assisting employers to access this program for many years, most people are only learning about it now. Under the work sharing program, you're not laying off, but sharing the available work between employees with similar roles who form part of a work sharing unit when there's a temporary decrease in business activity. Unlike the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, which I will speak to in a moment, work share is best used where business disruption is expected to last more than just a few weeks. It has a minimum duration of 6 weeks and a maximum duration of approximately 19 months. During this time, employees agree to reduce their hours between 10 to 60% while their employer recovers, and they receive a prorated portion of EI benefits for the hours given up. The objective of this program is to bring all of these employees back up to 100% of their hours. They're required to be your core employees, so make sure to choose carefully because terminations, layoffs, and new hires during a work sharing agreement requires notification and consent from Service Canada. If we move on to the next slide to talk about temporary layoffs, there may be situations where layoffs are appropriate, and regardless of whether your company is non-unionized, you can always do a temporary layoff. However, if this has not been contemplated and expressly set out in your employment agreements or company policies, you run a higher risk of constructive dismissal claim and having to pay out severance. While the legislation indicates that you do not need to give a period of notice before starting a layoff in specific situations, the longer this COVID pandemic continues, the more likely you are to be required to give notice as your organization is no longer reacting to an unforeseen occurrence. So I would always recommend giving as much written notice as possible, and written notice is required to meet all of the employment standards requirements for the jurisdiction that the employee is in. I would always recommend that you have the employee sign an acknowledgement as well, and keep in mind that different provinces have different maximum lengths of time before a temporary layoff becomes a termination. But in many provinces, including in Alberta and Ontario, this can be extended by providing health benefits or a financial benefit of some kind, which includes a supplementary unemployment benefit program, which we'll talk about on the next slide. Under the supplemental benefit or unemployment benefit program, this allows you to register your company policy related to financial benefits so that these payments do not affect an employee's weekly EI entitlements. So any money that you give to an employee doesn't grind down the amount that they would get from EI. One caution is that this policy becomes a binding contract between the employer and Service Canada. So it's always good to have it reviewed by legal before you submit it. Next slide. If you do have to proceed with terminating an employment contract, we can help you prepare the documentation and give you guidance as to how to do this while remaining sensitive to an employee situation, compliant with the legislation, and mitigating risk. I'm now going to talk in greater detail about the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. This was announced last week and got everybody fairly excited. Originally, when a wage subsidy was announced, it was the temporary wage subsidy, which Ben will talk to as well, and employers just thought that it wasn't enough. So they went back and re-looked at this program and came out with the new Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, which provides 75% of an employee's salary or wages, up to the first $58,700 paid, to a maximum of $847 per week. Now, this is up to 75% of an employee's salary or wages. So an individual who makes $58,700, the government would essentially pay $44,000 of that. That's 75%. For an employee who makes much more than that, if you have an individual who makes $100,000, the government is still only paying $44,000 for that individual. So the employer is still required, if possible, to provide that additional amount. This is a 12-week program, so it is a shorter program than something like WorkShare. It runs for the pay periods between March 15th to June 6th. So the first pay period that it covers, if you are approved for the month of March, it covers March 15th to April 11th pay periods. If you get approved for the month of April, it covers April 12th to May 9th pay period. And then if you get approved for the month of May, it covers May 10th to June 6th pay period. You do have to apply for each of those. So if you get approved for March, you don't necessarily get approved for April. You do have to make a different application for each of those months. To be an eligible employer under this program, it's quite broad right now. The legislation still isn't out, so we're still waiting for the final wording on eligibility. But as it's written currently, it includes individuals, taxable corporations, nonprofit organizations, registered charities, and partnerships. Public bodies are not eligible under this program. And the requirement that the employer has to show is a gross revenue drop of at least 30%. So they review March of 2019 to March of 2020. They review April of 2019 to April of 2020, and they review May of 2019 to May of 2020. The employer must make an attestation that they have at least a 30% drop in revenue. There is no indication at this point as to what documentation or how much documentation you will have to provide as proof of that. It is quite likely that there will be minimal documentation required at the front end, and that this will be reviewed in the future, whether it's a few months down the line or whether it's just a tax time next year. So it is important to make sure that you keep all the documentation you use to make your calculations, so that when you get reviewed, and it's when you get reviewed, you have all that information at hand and you can show them what you did. One of the concerns with this program is that they have said anybody who is looking to abuse the program will face severe penalties and consequences. So you want to make sure that everything that you're submitting is accurate and honest, and that you have backup to show how you came to those numbers. So how do we apply to this? So the next slide goes over how to apply. This is through the CRA. This is not a Service Canada program. This is through the CRA. So the Government of Canada warned everybody last week that if they did not already have a My Business account, they should apply for one, because the Canada Emergency Response Benefit actually launches today. And so they were quite concerned that their website would be overrun today and would not be able to sign up for a My Business account. But you do still need to do that. So if you haven't done that, you should get on that, as well as signing up for direct deposit. More detail about the application process is supposed to be released soon. It was stated within the speeches last week that it should be up within 3 to 6 weeks. And so we're just waiting on more information on that. Like I said, with regards to compliance and penalties, you do have to make an attestation. So you do want to make sure that whatever you are submitting is accurate and honest. And there are some complications with some of the terminology right now as to what would constitute arm's length. So if your employees are in a subsidiary of your corporation or a sister company of your corporation and the money comes in through another side, if you're paying then that other corporation, is that an arm's length transaction? So we are waiting for some clarification on some of that. It would be good to have your applications reviewed before you submit, just to make sure that what you're submitting doesn't just get approved, because all of these are going to get approved fairly quickly, and that you do actually qualify, because you don't want to run into any problems at the back end of this. One of the other things that we learned with regards to the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy is that it does not cover sub-payments. So the supplemental unemployment benefits, which I spoke about a few minutes ago, if you pay that out, that's not considered wages under the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. So that does not qualify. as well, anybody who is on the Canada Emergency Response Benefit who's receiving financial aid on that is not eligible under the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy as well, which makes sense because to be on the CERB, you are supposed to be not earning any wages. So I'll pass it over to Ben to talk about temporary wage subsidy.
Okay, thank you, Jenna. I'm going to pick it up from temporary wage subsidy, which is initially announced as 10% of the subsidy before the 70% subsidy was announced. So this program is a 3-month measure that will allow eligible employer to reduce 10% the amount of payroll deduction required to be remitted to the CRA for an amount up to $1,375 per eligible employee to a maximum amount of $25,000. Eligible employer include individual small CCPC, partnership, MPO, and registered charity. Eligible employee has a pretty wide scope. Currently, it means an individual who is employed in Canada. Compared to the 75% subsidy, to apply for, you don't need to apply for this 10% subsidy. The mechanism for receiving the subsidy is that the employer will continue deducting income tax, CPP and EI premiums from the wages or salary paid to the employee. Once the subsidy is calculated, the employer can use this amount to reduce the payroll remittance on the income tax deduction portion that to be remitted to the CRA. And this subsidy is taxable income to the employer, just to be keep in mind. The next slide, I'm going to talk about the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. We call that CERB. This one is a support program that was provided for the employee or a worker that lost income or self-employed income and stopped working due to the COVID-19 situation. So this is a program that is paid in blocks of 4 weeks in amount of $2,000. So which is equivalent to $500 per week for a maximum period of 16 weeks. The CERB is, the purpose of this program is to put in place as a temporary replacement of regular EI and sickness benefit. So the person who is receiving EI benefit is not eligible for the CERB at the same time. And here the EI benefit I'm referring to is as regular EI or sickness EI benefit. The application starts today. So if you have the CRA my account already set up, you can apply from there, or you can call in to make an application by phone. CERB payment shall be applied and issued on a 4-week basis. So you need to reapply it every 4 weeks. The next slide, I'm going to just use this timeline graphic to give you a quick overview of the eligibility between the EI benefit and the CERB. So if you applied EI after or on March 15th, the application will be automatically processed as CERB. If you are in receipt of EI benefit before March 15th, you cannot reapply CERB unless the EI benefit runs out before October 3rd. So the next part, I'm going to talk about some of the tax reliefs. We have covered most of the measures in the last webinar. These rules are clear enough to follow through the slides if this is the first time you join us. One thing I didn't mention last time is that if you are in corporate NPO, the extension rule to deadline of filing your T2 and T1044 is the same as corporations. In the recent announcement, the CRA has confirmed that deadline for business to file their GST/HST return is still unchanged. Those who are able to should continue to file their return on time. However, recognizing the difficult times faced by businesses, the CRA will not impose penalties where a return is filed late, provided that it's filed on or before June 30th. Eligible employers with annual payroll up to 5 million would be exempt from employer health tax EHT on the first 1 million of the total Ontario remuneration in 2020. One of the questions asked in the last webinar was whether this 5 million payroll amount would include employment benefit portion. The answer is yes. For EHT purpose, remuneration include all employment income, benefits, and allowances that are taxable under the Income Tax Act. One exception is that eligible employers who are registered charities can claim this exemption even if their payroll exceed 5 million threshold. The next slide, I'm going to talk about some of the financing support program. In the last webinar, I mentioned that as a small and medium-sized enterprise or not-for-profit organization, you may have access to financing through BCAP program. These programs are currently available and will roll out in the 3 weeks period after March 2017. Since there is a capped amount under each program, I would recommend you to contact your financial institution right away. I did receive some comment that some banks do not seem to be aware of these programs, so I put down the BDC and EDC contact information on the slide here so that I can pass it along to your financial institution. For the last topic, I listed some government funding that are available to startups and a small, medium-sized business. If you are involved in R&D activities, make sure don't miss the claims for SHRED or ARAP. If you are a tourism operator or a small business that is affected by COVID-19 and need pressing assistance, you are encouraged to contact the office of your regional development agency, and they can assist you pathfinding access to federal funding and services. If you are hiring post-secondary students and have not been receiving funding from other sources, you might want to look into Magnet Student Workplace Program. There were opportunities for some business to maintain the operation while helping combat COVID-19. The government is calling for action from Canadian manufacturers in helping meet the need for medical supplies. If your equipment or facilities can be rapidly retooled to meet medical needs. National Research Council and Innovation Solution Canada have launched multiple challenge programs, providing financial support to companies to refine and sell their product or solutions to meet COVID-19 related need. This presents opportunities for business in many sectors, such as high tech, bioscience, and IT. If you can become involved in these programs, you can maintain the operation of your business and become part of the solution. That will be the end of this presentation. Victoria?
Yes, thank you so much, Ben. That's very informative and very helpful. I think we've gone over quite a few different things, particularly with you know, the CERB program, the funding, government funding that is available to everyone. And you know, it's just very fortunate to have KPMG here as a guest today. So what we're going to do is we're going to move over to the Q&A portion of today. So for everyone, if you have questions, please submit them on the bottom of your screen. There is a Zoom Q&A function. You can type in your question there. Please know that this webinar is also being recording, and you will be sent a recording after the call in an email. but mostly they'll have one-on-one consultations shortly, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. So if anybody has any questions at all, please enter them into the Q&A feature on the screen. And we do have one question here. It says, does it cover the CEWS, does it cover commission employees? Ben, are you still there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Commission employee. So as long as there is an employment relationship between the commission employee and this particular employer we're talking about, the salary or wages that paid to the commission employee will be covered by the 75% wage subsidy. Yes.
Okay, perfect. And how does the overlap go between unemployment insurance and filing with the new program? Is there a difference between the two if you already have a pending EI claim?
Yeah, this is a very good question. So as I mentioned, that the emergency response benefit that was implemented as a temporary substitution of the regular EI benefit, because the EI system was not designed to incorporate so many applications. So for the period when the SERB, the emergency response benefit become effective, any EI application will automatically be processed as the SERB. So if you submitted your application before, I think it's April 6th of the SERB program, it's today actually, start being applied. If the application is in process, that's the same situation. You will be automatically be switched to the SERB program.
So again, we're very fortunate to have Ben and Jenna join us today. Ben is a tax manager with KPMG, and he's joining us from Ottawa today, and he serves on the national response team helping clients navigate through employment relief measures. And Jenna is joining us from out west in Calgary, and she's a lawyer with the business law practice at KPMG. And she's engaged in the labor and employment group in Calgary and heads their business immigration group. So again, we're very fortunate today to have you on the call and to be able to give us an update as the COVID-19 legislation changes. Everything is happening so rapidly. So again, I just want to thank Jenna and Ben from KPMG and all our community partners at WeTech and Innovate Niagara who made this experience come to life. So be well, be safe, and thank you so much for joining us today.